I started playing in bands at around 15 years old. I had been playing bass guitar for about 2 years at that point, and electric guitar for a bit less. It was fun trying to play along to songs in my room and all, but solo jamming was obviously only part of the enjoyment of playing an instrument. Like hitting a tennis ball against a wall. It can be fun, I guess, but no one has ever won Wimbledon by being good at playing against a wall. My first amp was a tiny RMS bass amp, which was something like 10 watts. With the volume knob on the amp, as well as all the other knobs, cranked as high as they can go, it was completely inaudible compared to every drummer I tried to jam with. Granted, I was super into punk rock at the time, and most drummers who would play with me hit the drums as hard as humanly possible. Some drummers even held the drumstick in the middle of the stick so they could hit that much harder. It was kind of nice at times that no one could hear how badly I was playing the guitar and how out of tune it was. But something had to change. Near the end of my sophomore year, I upgraded to a Marshall JCM 800 combo amp. It was a 50-watt tube amp and was super loud, like Shake the House loud. Around that time, I was jamming with the same people weekly. None of us really knew how to sing or anything, but punk rock was a style of music where the inability to sing didn't really present much of a problem. What was a problem was being able to hear who was trying to sing at our jams. We had acquired a Radio Shack vocal mic and a small combo amp as our vocal setup. To the best of our ability, we plugged it all in and turned the amp on. We turned it off. It didn't take long to discover there was a hard limit to how loud a cheap, crappy mic into a guitar amp was able to go. At max non-feedback level, our vocal setup was just slightly better than not singing into anything. It's not like our lyrics were really that great, so not hearing them wasn't the worst thing ever, but not really how we envisioned our band's journey to greatness. As the post-high school years began, I got more and more into playing in bands. The local music scene, and putting on shows and stuff. I was working at a Value Village at the time, and living in a friend's basement for cheap, so had some money to burn. I invested in a small PA system. No one really wanted to be the one to plug everything in. I figured, how hard can it be? Technically speaking, that sentence was my starting point at me becoming a pro audio tech. Being a pro audio tech, sound guy, audio engineer, or whatever, is something that is not very well understood by most people. And why would it be? It's the kind of job that, if done correctly, the audience doesn't even know you are there. The curtain of mystery is usually only drawn when there is a problem, and people with rolls of tape, tools, and tour passes hanging off their waists are scrambling on stage trying to fix whatever went wrong. If you have ever seen a giant board with a bunch of precarious looking knobs and buttons on it, you probably were looking at an audio console. These days, most audio consoles are digital, but basically do the same thing as the old school ones. As a sound tech, you are responsible for operating one of these during a show, but it usually doesn't end there. You could also be responsible for loading in a bunch of heavy cases, setting up all the gear, sound checking the band.
Here, bass. Drums, can you not play for 2 seconds? I said bass. Thank you. Bass, please. Fuck.
Making sure nothing breaks during the show, complaints department, band guidance counselor, tearing down the gear, getting it back into the truck or trailer or whatever, then doing it all again the next night. There are many levels of quality and responsibility when it comes to sound techs. Some do as little as set up some gear at an open mic night for a few beers as payment. Other, more accomplished ones like Dave Rat can be found behind an audio console at a giant arena show for huge acts. I'm not sure how much they make per show, but I'm sure it's enough to buy many, many beers, among other things like cars and houses. But these guys are at the top of their game, which is definitely not where I started. Back in '99, when I purchased my first PA system from Mother's Music, which eventually became Long & McQuaid here in Winnipeg. For the low price of around $1,500, I got a Yamaha EMX 640 powered mixer, 2 Yamaha monitors, 2 SM58 vocal mics, and all the required cables and such. I actually still have the PA today, and it's what I listen to records on. That thing was a workhorse. It was in use basically every day for 15 years, coming on tour, in the jam space, at local shows. At one point, it had been completely submerged in water. I think over the years, I had to repair it maybe twice. Similar to buying a Mac for the first time at 40 years old, when I first bought the PA, I had no idea how it really works. Maybe I could take a course or something to learn how to do sound, the 19-year-old version of me thought. My parents had kind of been on me to try to get into a career or go back to school. It was obvious playing in a band wasn't going to pay the bills anytime soon, and I never really thought of working at Value Village as a long-term career goal. There are basically two fields in the audio world, live sound and recording. To try to put it in perspective, it's kind of similar to farming and cooking. Both deal with food, but in very different ways. Not to say that a live engineer can't be awesome in the studio, just like a farmer can rule at cooking. But for the most part, you usually specialize in one or the other. I enrolled in a course at Midocean School of Media Arts in Winnipeg. Midocean has been around for over 25 years now, but at the time, it was still pretty new. The full-time course was a bit pricey and also focused mainly on the recording side of things. The part-time course was a bit more flexible in terms of the curriculum, and the instructor did their best to try to tailor the course to fit my interest in live sound. Like so many other objectives in life, there is no substitution for real-world experience. My band at the time, lacking intelligence, had played the Royal Albert the previous weekend, and Lee the sound tech seemed super nice. I asked if he could show me some pointers, and he said he would be happy to next weekend if I wanted to come down around 9 p.m. Lee seemed surprised I actually showed up the next weekend. He let me plug in the mic cables, put mics on stands, and on the drum kit. The band started, and Lee's hands were flying around the console, turning knobs and pushing faders. He probably could have done it with his eyes closed. Once the levels were pretty much set, he walked away and told me I could watch the board. When looking at an audio console, most people just see a whole ton of knobs, slidey thingies, and buttons, thinking it's probably impossible to know what all of them do. It's not as hard as you think. First off, let's focus on an individual channel. All the knobs on the first column are part of channel 1. If you plug a mic into channel 1, then all the knobs, buttons, and faders on that channel will affect that mic, and only that mic. There is no standard layout for audio consoles, but most are very similar. The knob at the top is usually the gain or trim, and basically increases the sensitivity of the mic. In simple terms, if the drum, guitar, voice, or whatever you are trying to mic isn't loud enough, you might have to turn this knob to the right. Next usually is the EQ section. These knobs boost or cut the level of certain frequencies to help improve the quality of the sound. A lot of the time, you can do more damage than good with the EQ, but doesn't mean you should be scared to take a crack at turning some knobs. A lot of consoles have preset values, but fancier ones allow you to sweep through the frequencies to select exactly what frequency to boost or cut. Really fancy consoles, and most modern digital consoles, have something called the cube, which either widens or narrows the boost or cut. For example, if you are listening to your favorite Gregular and the Inside Job song, and you boost at the frequency of 500 Hz, it would sound like this. If the Q is at 0.5 or a low value, it would be a super wide cut, so a lot of the frequencies around 500 Hz would also be affected. If the Q is at 10 or a high value, it would be a super narrow cut, so mainly only 500 Hz would be affected. Next section is the aux send section. These are basically volume knobs that send signal to outputs on the back of the console. Often, a stage monitor will be hooked up to one of these babies. Not like a computer monitor. In the audio world, a monitor refers to a speaker on the stage so that the artist can hear themselves. When you are in a giant room with a loud band behind you and a bunch of people yelling, it's very hard to hear yourself. Not much of what is coming out of your mouth is actually getting into your ears, and the speakers in the main PA system are pointed at the crowd. At least they should be. Anyways, the stage monitor helps by amplifying your voice or whatever right back into your head. If you want to get fancier, in-ear monitors are what the real big shots use. You can get a pair for a few $100, but for custom molds that fit your ear perfectly and sound amazing, you can spend thousands. An aux or auxiliary output is also what you would use to send signal to an outboard effect unit, like a reverb or a delay. Usually below the aux section is the pan knob, which, assuming your PA is a stereo rig, will send the mic a bit more to the left or to the right. This helps create the illusion that the PA isn't there and that you are just experiencing the band on stage. Below the pan knob is the fader or slidey thingy. The fader controls the level of the mic in the mix, or how much of the mic you are sending to the PA. This explanation is by far not all there is to know about an audio console, but is way more than I knew the first time I ever stood in front of one. The first night I ever did sound, it was basically just Lee doing it, and me standing there trying not to look like a total idiot. I guess I didn't get in the way too much or anything, and he even tossed me $20 for helping set up and tear down. The very next day, I got a call from Lee. Lee had another gig pop out of nowhere and needed someone to cover for him at the Albert. I said, well, I don't know really what the fuck I'm doing yet or anything, but sure, I'll be right there. It's hard to really convey all the emotions I was feeling. Excited that I might get to quit my day job soon and just be a sound person. Scared that I would screw it up so bad I wouldn't be allowed to touch an audio console ever again. The night didn't go great, and I definitely forgot to turn on the singer's mic at the start of the show, but I guess it was good enough for the Albert. At the end of the night, I basically got paid $50 for plugging some stuff in and watching a show. It was like a dream come true. It wasn't being on stage, which was where my heart and passion truly wanted to stand, but it was the next best thing. An upgrade from being just a face in the crowd. I did sound at the Albert almost every weekend that summer, and usually several weekdays too. It wasn't big money, but it was enough to quit my job at Value Village and feel like I finally had some forward momentum in life. I'm sure everyone who works in the audio field has an equally unconventional story to how they found their way into the music biz. Doing sound has filled that financial void in my life where playing music was falling short, but still allowing me to be a part of the music scene and not have to hide behind a tie in an office job to earn a paycheck. It's taught me more skills than I ever thought I would learn, and how to work harder than I ever imagined was possible. My longest day ever worked on a gig was a 26-hour day. There are difficult days, and no shortage of egos in the field, both earned and assumed. It's the kind of job that with only a handful of knowledge, you can get away with doing many smaller gigs and kind of thinking you know everything. Kind of like Luke Skywalker thinking he could take on Darth Vader after floating a few rocks and doing a front flip while wearing Yoda as a backpack. Know-it-all sound people are all over the place and take every chance to puff their chests and to try to prove their knowledge to peers. It's not until you get deeper into the job you learn how involved the field is, and some of the best techs I've ever worked with have little to no attitude. The best techs always keep a cool head when something goes wrong, with fixing the problem being priority one, instead of trying to play the blame game. I've been working in audio for over 20 years, and I hope to do another 20 or more. Who knows what the future will hold? Maybe one day audio consoles will mix themselves, or everyone will just have implants in their head, with the music at a concert beamed into some kind of a futuristic cybernetic interface. No matter what it is, I'm sure there will still be a need to troubleshoot the problems when trying to get all the fancy gear to work properly. I hope in 20 years I still have that roll of gaff tape in my hands, ready to patch the music scene together for another show.
You ever watched Narcos before?
I've only seen The British Office.